And so in that context, there are a couple ways we present information, and there are certain ways to retain the context when we work through that information. Very commonly, you can engage people in dialogue, and then as the conversation progresses, you don't even know what you're talking about anymore. You've moved on through 5 different topics, you've gone around in circles, and you didn't get anywhere. So that's mainly what this show is about, is highlighting that problem and discussing a little bit to present ways that you can prevent that kind of thing from happening. First of all, it is very, very important that you set the context and stay within it for this reason. Okay? The issues that we most commonly present to people can be generally called controversial. And that in and of itself is a major reason to set the context for discussion. Because in setting that context, we can disarm people up front and allow the discussion to be more open and productive. An example of this would be when we talk about the monetary system. That's a pretty big issue. We all like to get on that topic. But if you come off the bench saying stuff like, money needs to be abolished, the money is the cause of all the world's problems, or profit is the source of all corruption, these kind of things are, almost anybody would call them controversial. And that, in and of itself, puts up barriers. Okay? So, are these things even true? Well, the answer can be yes, but the answer can also be no. It depends upon 2 things: the context and your perspective, or the other person's perspective. Now, I personally am very aware of this whenever I talk to people. I'm looking to understand their perspective, and I want to know the context in which information or declaratives is being given. So to me, the dialogue will always depend upon the context in which it is presented. If you fail to give a context, I will commonly fail to participate in productive conversation. See, now I do this consciously. Most people will actually do this automatically or subconsciously. If you don't set the context, they will assume whatever context is relevant to their perspective. So since we have no control over another person's perspective to begin with, we must set the context, or you will be certain to clash with their perspective. For this example, an appropriate action would be to start with a question, and use that question to set the context for those declaratives about money or monetarism. So, do you think that the discovering of the root of social problems is a good way to affect a solution? That question right there does a number of things. It opens up the discussion to understanding another person's perspective, because right there you're asking them what their opinion is of even having the topic, even having the discussion. So you can understand part of their perspective there right off the bat, which is very, very important to effective communication. But more importantly, it sets the context, that context being determining the root cause of social problems for the purpose of getting a solution. So from that point, you can say something like, profit-seeking creates the propensity for corruption. And you can justify that by referencing the context of determining the root of social problems, which I'm sure most anyone would agree that corruption is a big social problem which deserves consideration. So this technique is a tool for moving past the hindrance of opinions versus perspective-based analysis. Those things most commonly create those huge barriers of resistance whenever we're communicating on the topics. Mel, did you want to jump in with any dialogue?
Well, actually, I'm enjoying hearing what you have to say about this, because a lot of people don't like to put things into context. I think part of putting things into context as well is understanding a person's perception or point of view right off the bat, because their context, once again, can be just as skewed as yours are, based on whatever filters you have whenever that particular topic arises. So I think it's very important that both parties define which context they're speaking in. That way, they can stay within within that conversation as two intelligent people can talk about something. The thing is, again, it's important to understand his definition of that context as well, because one particular word in a specific topic can change the complete meaning of everything for one person, and have another meaning for the other person. So, I don't want to get into this esoteric discussion of how people think or how they feel, but it is obvious that each person has a unique filter that he perceives all the information and data that surrounds him, that permeates his entire sphere. So that's really important that people do get down to that level of understanding before they start getting into debate. Otherwise, you get a lot of animosities and misunderstandings. And I've seen things come down the road, a week or two later, they have the same conversation, and one guy apologizes for acting like a dirtbag and an asshole, but the other guy says, well, had you said this or something, wait a minute, I meant that, and then come to figure out that neither one had anything to be angry about, because one meant one thing and the other person meant the other thing. So it's really important that this topic is a critical issue when it comes to communication, especially with people that have a different mindset than we do. Today, I find myself thinking in a different way altogether, and that's helped me to learn how to communicate, because my point of view now is trying to understand the other person rather than trying to convince the other person to understand me. And I'll give that back to you here, Scott.
Yeah, you made a couple of really good points there I want to expand on. First of all is, it's hard to get on the topic of stuff that can be interpreted. And trying to grasp all those possible interpretations is generally futile. But understanding that process and understanding people's interpretations and that people are going to interpret things is imperative to communicating. The example you gave there of people fighting over something that's really insignificant, and the difference between a meaning of a word is really crucial to understand, because there's a process there in that fight. Okay, because I'm trying to wrap my head around this, because it's not really on this topic, but it's really important to explain this, and I've got kind of a point of view about how people go through a process of being upset about something, or even just considering anything. Because whenever you consider something, you have your first reaction. You think about it, you decide something, and you're ready to act on it after a short period of time thinking about it. And then later on, especially if it's a controversial issue, later on you commonly come to reconsider it. And when you reconsider it, and you may come to a new conclusion that's polar opposite of your original conclusion. And then you maybe want to act on that. And then you come down the line some more and you reconsider it again. Now having both of these polar opposite opinions in your experience or consideration of it, you now realize that your opinion really falls somewhere in the middle. Both of these polar ideas are maybe relative, they may be true, but you should really just act on this one position in the middle. And from that point, either keep that conclusion and you never come back to reconsider it, or people always come back around to reconsidering things over and over and over again. But understanding that process of people's first reactions and reconsiderations and where that leads you to in your decision making is very important.